Hi everyone, it's Jessica. Lately I have been playing a lot with both my watercolor paints and also my thin cuts, so I thought this would be a good opportunity to share with you how I played with both of those things. I've been using them a lot lately. I did get these watercolor paints for Christmas, and then I also have the water brush, which makes it really easy to use them. And so here you can see the first time I was playing with it, I just made like a rainbow card, and it's really pretty. And you can also use the same color, or I mean different shades of the same color, and make like an ombre effect. And then here you can see I made this cute little fairy card, and I used some pink in the background for my fairy. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how I did all of that, and use the die cut, the thin cut, to cut out the fairy so that I could pop her up on that pink background. So I'm going to go ahead and walk you through how to use all of those things, and if at any point you have any questions, just let me know. So at this point I'm going to go ahead and start speeding up the video so that you don't have to watch it taking a really long time to come together. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to show how to use the thin cut. So this is my Cuttlebug machine, and you just need to have the A plate, the B plates, and then the little foam mat so that way it'll cut through. So you stack it all together, and this is my Fairy Tales stamp set that comes with the thin cut. And so I'm going to go ahead and pull that thin cut out, and I'm going to put it down with the sharp side downside onto my little piece of scrap paper, so that way I can run it through the die cut machine. And I layer all of my various plates together, run it through, and then ta-da, I have the fairy already cut out, and I don't have to do any fussy cutting for her. And so there she is. And that little die cut comes on a on a magnetic sheet, and so that way I don't lose it. So it kind of stamps right back on into my spot. So now I need to stamp the fairy on top of my thin cut that I just did. And so I'm just going to line everything up and put some black ink on her so that I can color over her later. And here you can see I'm just stamping her. And then I do use my new Close to My Heart chamois to clean off my stamps. It is my new favorite thing. It works so much better than a stamp scrubber, and it's a little wet, but it's not dripping wet or soaking wet. I can just leave it sitting out on the table and it's not getting anything wet, and it just cleans the stamps really, really well. So now that I've got my fairy cut, she is ready to go. So the next thing that I'm going to need to do is to create my little pink background. Now, I did originally on this first card use my watercolor paper because I am, after all, using watercolors, but my watercolor paper has a creamy look to it. And everything else in my card is a brighter white. So since my white cardstock is really thick, I'm going to go ahead and try painting it on my white cardstock rather than using my watercolor paper this time around. And it does end up working out just fine. And I think that's because my paper was so thick. If you have a thinner paper, I would not recommend using the watercolors on it just because it's wet, right? And it's paper. But this is really thick cardstock, so everything worked out pretty well. So I'm just taking my water brush and I squeeze it to get a little bit of water out into the paint and mix it up. And then I just kind of spreading it across my rectangle here until I get the look that I like. And then off camera, I am going to take my piece of paper and I just dry it really fast using my embossing heat gun. Although if you don't have one, you could certainly just kind of let it sit until it's dry, maybe for a few hours. But because I did heat it and it was wet, you can see that my paper is buckled just a little bit. So later on, you're going to see that one of the first things that I do with it is go ahead and mat it on my blue paper, which kind of helps to keep it flat a little bit. And that way, when I go to stamp Life as a Fairy Tale on top, my paper isn't sticking up anywhere. And it helps, that blue mat kind of helps to keep it flat. So I'm going to go ahead and start assembling my card. And one of the things my dad always told me when I was growing up is to measure twice and cut once. And for this card, when I had all my pieces ready to go for the video, I did forget that I had cut that white pattern piece down just a little bit so that I could have some blue cardstock showing behind it. So some of my pieces were just a tad bit too long, and I had to trim them up real quick on the fly, but it did work out just fine. Like this pink piece I'm about to put down, oh shoot, it was just a little bit too long because I forgot that I cut that white one, and I didn't want it to go over the blue that's on the back. So I do have to trim two little pieces very quickly for that. But like I said, I went ahead and put that watercolor piece that we did on the blue cardstock and just kind of glued it down with a lot of adhesive. That way when I stamp on it in a second, everything is laying flat. and it doesn't mess up my stamping. So just go ahead and assemble, and I put some white ribbon up at the top and run my adhesive over the ribbon, and then just kind of stick the ends on the back side. Eventually I will put this onto the front of a card base, so everything that's kind of sticking out in the back right there with those ribbon pieces, it won't show. Okay, so now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and put that on there, and my fairy is going to go on top. So first I need to get down my Life is a Fairy Tale sentiment. So again, make sure that you always stamp with your little foam sheet underneath, because that gives a little bit of room for your stamp to push down, and you get a much better image that way. And those come with a stamp set, so just always make sure that you put it under whatever it is that you are going to be stamping. So I stamped my sentiment on there, and again, use my stamp chamois to clean it off quickly and easily. And then I'm all done with that part. And so now I can go ahead and finish assembling the card. So I'm going to put this piece onto the front. And then I forgot to get out my foam tape and bring it up with me where I was recording the video. But on the original card, I do pop up the fairy with some foam tape. So I didn't finish putting her down here in this particular video just because I didn't have that with me at the moment. But I go ahead and put our pink watercolor piece down. You can see I took a little piece of white ribbon and just kind of trimmed a little tiny piece of it and stuck it to the behind so that it kind of looked like it had two little ends coming out of the side over where that ribbon was on the front of the card. And then I need to go ahead and finish preparing my fairy herself. So I used a couple of different things to color her. I used my shimmer brushes from Close to My Heart, and I used my alcohol markers also from Close to My Heart. Now the brown one that I'm starting with for her hair, these ones are really cool. They're tri-blend, so it's 3 shades of the same color. So you can kind of play around a little bit with shading, but they all obviously go together because it's the exact same color, just a lighter, a medium, and a dark. Then I'm going to, after I color her hair, I'm going to go through and I'm going to color her skin using another one of my Shinhan alcohol markers, and just kind of go around and do that. One of the ways that I'm going to use my shimmer brush here, I love the shimmer brush, not only for the shimmer part of it, because who doesn't like a little glitter, but I really love to use my shimmer brushes as a way to color my stamped images, because they go on with a lot of, they're pretty good actually with their precision, the tip of them, and it just kind of gives a nice little hint of color on it, and depending on how much you squeeze out, you could make it a little bit darker or lighter, however many times you go over that particular spot. So I'm just using my pink shimmer brush here to kind of color in her dress, and it adds a little bit of sparkle to it, and then like I said, it's just a really pretty way to put some color onto your stamped images. So I go through and do that. Excuse me. To get your shimmer brush started before you first use it, before each time that you use it, you're just going to shake it, and you keep shaking it and shaking it until you hear what sounds like, you know, when you use a spray can, a spray paint can, and you have to shake it so that you hear that ball rattling around on the inside. It's the same thing with the shimmer brush. So you just shake it, shake it, shake it until you start to hear that rattle in there, and then you're ready to go. And then I usually squeeze a little bit out onto a scrap piece of paper to kind of get the flow going and make sure that I have enough of the color coming out of the pen. And so same thing, that's what I'm going to do with my gold shimmer brush here. And my gold shimmer brush tends to be a little juicy, I guess you could say. So sometimes I accidentally squeeze a little bit too much out, even if I am starting it on a little scrap piece of paper over to the side. And so in fact, that does happen with this one. Whoopsie, I got a little bit too much. And so I just took my paper towel that I was using from my watercolor paints, and I was able to kind of soak some of that up and spread it out a little bit. So this is my gold shimmer brush. So I'm just going in over her wings to make it look like she has golden wings. And then she is pretty much ready to go. She needs to dry a little bit because I did have a lot of my shimmer brush paint on there. And like I said, I didn't have my foam tape. So ultimately I would put all of that together, foam tape behind her. Once she's dry, I use the sparkles to kind of go around above the sentiment, and then even put a little bit on top of her wand. And so those are just some of the things that I have done to play with my thin cuts and my watercolors. Now, another thing that I've been doing with my watercolor paint is you can mix it up, and then you can tap your water brush. So that way you're kind of getting a splatter effect on a piece of paper. So in addition to actually painting on your paper, you can just get little bits of color, and you can see I'm just kind of knocking it against my finger. And this particular way that I'm doing it is actually making some really tiny splatters. So I don't know if you'd be able to see it very well in the camera. There you can see some of that blue. But that's just another way that you can use the watercolors and the water brush. So a lot of fun things to do. You can paint over some of your stamped images. You can create some backgrounds for cards or scrapbook pages, or you can make a splatter effect for cards or scrapbook pages. So if you ever have any questions about using any of these things, please let me know. I would be happy to help you. It's something that I'm still continuing to play with myself and kind of learn from. And so I would be happy to kind of explore some of these fun things with you. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you.